Hello again, and welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. Our podcast aims to provide distinctive perspectives and concepts for building leadership capacity to meet the challenges of a volatile and uncertain future. I am Dr. John D'Antico, your host. What does it mean to be self-aware? How does self-awareness enable people to become better leaders? Today we will take a trip down the road of self-awareness with Mr. Marten Niner. Having served in other capacities throughout his career, Marten is an ICF certified executive life and leadership coach. If you are intrigued or just curious about the nexus between self-awareness and living a confident and productive life, I'm sure you'll find my conversation with Marten Niner eye-opening and compelling. So let's get started. And if you enjoy our podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. We genuinely appreciate your support. Hello again, and welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. I am Dr. John D'Antico, your host. Today, my guest is Marten Niner. Marten is an accomplished executive, serial entrepreneur, ICF certified executive life and leadership coach, team builder, board member, speaker, improvisationalist, musician, and much more. I am pleased to have him here with us today. Good morning, Marten. How are you today?
Good morning, John. I'm doing fantastic.
Great to hear it. Marten, as I'm fond of saying, let's jump right in and get down to business.
Okay.
Let me start off with this question. I think we can agree that a great deal has changed in the wake of the COVID pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think this is a good thing, and why so?
I do think it's a good thing. I think that the world needed to change. I know that some terrible things happened during COVID, and I don't think that was good. But overall, I think, especially in the North American culture, going to work, working so hard, having to drive to and from work, now we found out that we can actually work from home and be successful and be productive. And we don't have to drive to work. My wife, before the pandemic, had to drive 45 minutes to work and back, and now she can work from the comfort of home. And so I think that those are big advantages for companies and for workers, but it also creates leadership challenges.
Oh, I agree. I absolutely agree with you there. In fact, I've been working in my capacity for 30 years, and
Mm-hmm.
I like to tell people the leadership perspectives that I have is not some quickly assembled set of ideas in the wake of the COVID pandemic. I've been working on this stuff for 30 years, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just that what COVID became was an accelerator more than anything else.
I agree. I think that, it's accelerated a lot of things, especially in business. Just being able to Zoom more like this is now far more common. And I think, again, it presents its challenges, but overall, I think it's a much better situation for companies and for employees.
Let's talk about that for a minute because it's interesting to me. One of the things I've been thinking a lot about lately is the hybrid perspective. Okay.
Mhm.
So let's just say, let's take a percentage, 50% working from home and 50% working in your brick and mortar establishment. What do you think organizations are going to have to do in terms of how they spend their time in the brick and mortar establishment? What are they going to have to do there that matters for people to come in and work, as opposed to what can be done on a Zoom call like this at home?
I think there's a couple of things. One is that there's the two different, and I'm breaking it into two. There's obviously a spectrum of workers, but there's some people who like to be in the office and some people that would rather work from home. But either way, I think that companies are going to have to continue to invest more in developing their people. Servant leadership, understanding of self-awareness, making sure that their employees are happy and content and feel safe either coming to work or working from home. Those types of things I think are going to be more and more important. And study shows from the Harvard Business Review is that when you take that approach, when you take that model, you can get 40 to 60% more efficiency and production out of people if they feel safe and they feel invested in.
I agree. I think that's people want. One of the
Mm-hmm.
things is people want to be involved in the
Mm-hmm.
decision-making processes of the organization. I think that's very important. Marten, let me ask you this question. In our a Zoom call exchange. You mentioned this notion of leading up in an org. Could you give us an explanation of what that means to you, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of my coaching clients are in positions, they're directors, senior vice presidents, and some of them are struggling with people that are up the chain. And so I view a leader in an organization is a leader regardless of the organizational chart. That person that's in a position that's one or two or three steps higher is just another human being that just happens to be in a different part of the organizational chart. And so I really encourage my people, my coaches, my coachees, is to engage with those people, learn about those people, find out why they're maybe having an issue with those people. And that's part of leading up is that if they become curious about not only the people that are above them, but their peers, the people that work for them or work with them, being curious and really understanding what they're up against is probably the number one job because finding out that information is what a lot of people forget to do.
Yeah, I agree. And also, there's this, you could say there's leading down too. The senior people in the organization have to really involve people in
Yeah.
whatever part of the organization strata they may sit,
Hmm.
because many times they know more than their bosses. Let me ask you this question. One of the other concepts that you mentioned again in our build up to this call was this idea of being in the moment.
Hmm.
Why don't you talk a little bit about that? I'm very interested to find out your thoughts on why is it important to be in the moment?
I think a lot of people waste a good deal of time and energy in either worrying about what happened or worrying about what they think is going to happen in the future. And I have found I've done it myself more than I would care to admit. And it really didn't serve me. I think it's a path to suffering. And so my clients and I talk a lot about how do you break away from that and really be in the moment and do the work that's in front of you and be curious about what's in front of you, because if you're worried about the future and you're creating all of these different scenarios that probably are not going to occur, we actually are terrible predictors of the future. I mean, you and I don't even know what we're going to talk about in the next 10 minutes. We have an idea, but we don't know specifically. So we really aren't, the future is really unknown. And so we talk a lot about in coaching about how to become comfortable with the unknown. And that's about being in the moment and just dealing with what's in front of you, doing the work that's in front of you is what we call it.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. To be honest, I look at future things myself and from a strategic thinking perspective. But I think many times they forget that the job today counts, that what's in front of
Mhm.
them counts. And if they just do what's in front of them today and tomorrow will, in a sense, take care of itself in some respects as well. So I agree. That's a very fundamental way of thinking about how work should be, in effect, carried out.
Right. And
Uh,
it's not a bad thing to think about the future. Like you said, there's
no,
strategic planning, there's setting goals. But once you set goals and then you adhere to them, even though you might have set ridiculous goals and then you beat yourself up over it, that's just a huge time waster, in my view, versus setting the goals, then exactly like you said, do the work that's in front of you. Tomorrow just going to take care of itself. And whatever happens is going to happen. And if you can be comfortable in that, then you're going to be a lot more successful leader, I think.
it's a very important point. Let me ask you this question. In your opinion, how important is it for a person to find a sense of purpose or a personal, if you will, mission in their lives and to work on completing that, if you will, or fulfilling that?
Oh, I can speak from my own experiences. I think it's extremely important. In my previous careers, like you said before, I was a serial entrepreneur. I've started 10 businesses over the course of 35 years. A lot of those times I didn't have a purpose. I was just trying to make money, trying to get by. And then later on in life, I found some causes that I could really get behind. Being a coach, waking up every morning is exciting to me because now I get to really help people. And that's now my purpose in life. And it's so much different. I remember in my 30s and 40s, I had four kids. I was just going, God, the alarm would go off in the morning. I'd just be like, oh my God, I got to do it again. Versus now, just this morning, my eyes were open 10 minutes before the alarm. I'm up, getting my coffee and ready to go. And it's just, I think that's part of it is finding that purpose. And the purpose can be found in any job, because really, most jobs, not all jobs, but most jobs have some type of human interaction. And that's really where I think, especially people who really want to be leaders and really take that next step to be aware leaders, that's really where the meaning is: sharing yourself with people, helping them find a purpose, helping them have fun or enjoy their job during the day. There's nothing better.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the keys, and I think we were seeing this at least in the post-pandemic perspective, is, and something I'm fond of saying, is you really need to create a workplace where people come to do their best work every single
Hmm.
day.
Yeah.
If you can do that, then you can start to build trust, mutual trust. You build that what I consider to be trust, the transcendent value. If you
Hmm.
don't have trust, buddy, you don't have anything. I think it's
Agreed.
really important.
Yeah. And trust starts with yourself, right? Trust starts with being a person of integrity. Trust starts with trusting yourself and not necessarily trusting all of the things that go on in your brain. We have this, we call it our ego defenses. Michael Singer, who wrote Untethered Soul, talks about the roommate in your head. And that roommate in your head argues with itself. It can argue
Oh,
two sides of a
oh,
thing, and we
oh.
think that's real, but really it's just part of our brains that is trying to help us, that right now most people's is overstimulated.
Yeah, I agree. I like to characterize it by having two attorneys on your shoulders. Right? One
Wouldn't that be
represents,
two devils though? Don't you need
well,
an
one
angel?
represent two attorneys on your shoulders. One represents your heart, the other one your head. And they're in court arguing every day for you, sometimes, and sometimes against you. It depends. And which one you're going to listen to, or is there a combination? Can you take from both and say, my heart says I should do this, but I really should be a little smarter about that in the way I carried it out. Carry it out.
Well, that's part of awareness, and that's really part of what I coach on. Is part of awareness is being able to hold two completely opposite thoughts in your mind at the same time and being curious about both of them. And that can apply to anything. A lot of us have these hard and fast rules that we like to have or follow, or that we think. But if we can step back from those and really think about them, just like you were saying, and take a step back, so is that really true? So becoming curious about what's going on in our own minds, I think, is the key to take that next step to being a great leader.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and let's do that. Let's go down that rabbit hole. Okay.
Sure.
In terms of self-awareness, because sometimes the way it's expressed can be a bit hard to define. Let me say it
Hmm.
that way. So if you would, please, what does self-awareness mean? How do you define it? What does it look like to you, Martin?
Ah, self-awareness has quite a few different components. I think it's the number one component to determine the success of a leader. And that is being in touch with not only what's going on in your own mind and your own body and in your brain, and to being able to observe what that is, but also being open and curious about the other people that are in your environment and knowing what they think about you. It's not only self-awareness, it's awareness around, okay, I'm a leader. I have these five people, let's say, that work with me. Do I know what each of their motivations are? Do I know what they feel about my leadership style? Have I asked for feedback from them? Have I given them honest and open feedback that's not complaining or not criticism, but really true open feedback? We do 360 evaluations that are specifically based on self-awareness, and basically rank individuals on certain components of awareness, and have other people's rate them, and then and match them and see if the people that they work with have the same view as me, the leader. And we find that the closer and closer that those are together, that the better leader you're going to be.
It's interesting. I think oftentimes when I've thought about what you've described, this sense of
Mm-hmm.
self-awareness, sometimes it seems to me, and I'm open here for any thoughts and corrections that you have. It seems to me when you say someone is really truly self-aware, that somehow they've reached some level of nirvanic transcendental understanding about themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm
that's how it's portrayed in the
yeah,
more the metaphysical community. I don't think that's true. I feel that I'm self-aware, but I haven't reached some plateau. I think self-awareness, like most things, it's a journey. There's certain things that I struggle with. My mentors talk all the time about how we teach what we need to learn, and the reason that I'm his coach is because I want to really learn about what I'm teaching, which
right.
a lot of it is self-awareness and curiosity. We talk a lot about power versus force. Force is manager, is advocating, is telling people what you want. Leading is power and asking people for the answers. There's that old adage about a manager goes into a group and says, "Okay, folks, here's the problem. Here's what I think we should do. What do you think we should do?" So they put their idea first. That's advocating, and then that reduces the amount of answers and creativity that you potentially could get. Whereas a leader walks into a room with a group of people and say, "Okay, here's the problem. What do you guys think we should do?" And is the last person to speak. And those are nuanced differences, but I find that they make a huge difference. And most of the people that I coach, that's what we work on quite a bit, is that power versus force, understanding what that means.
Yeah, I agree. In my definition of leadership, the first few lines are leadership is an influence relationship.
Hmm.
And I think we know people, I'm sure you've met them in your practice. I've met them certainly in my training that are not necessarily the leaders of the organization. They're the go-to people, as I like to call them. They have a certain level of corporate knowledge. They are trusted. And whenever you want to get the truth, you go to them because they're the go-to people. You go to them and you get the right answer, you get the
Hmm.
answer, right?
Right.
So they have influence. And to me, they're leaders. And just to get back to my point, because I want to, this is something that I've really orbited around for a while. This, as you have said, portrayed that somehow you reach some nirvanic transcendental level of understanding about yourself before you can engage in leadership, before you actually have to go out and be a leader or be part of a leadership dynamic, as I like to say. So, what I'm hearing you say is, again, it's a journey, and you become more self aware, if you will. And this is something I've done in my life, I've experienced in my life by the things that I did.
Mhm.
So I get involved. I've worked with groups and organizations. I learn a lot about myself
Yep.
in my engagement with them. Can you follow up with that? Give me some more ideas on how, what you think about that. You become through the act of doing. Let me ask it that way.
It's going back to we teach what we need to learn. One of the things that I tell my folks that I coach, my clients, is, now go out and teach what I've taught you. So then will be much better at it, just in the fact that you've made the attempt of teaching it. And we're all learning beings. Even the great gurus like Deepak Chopra and Gandhi and all those folks, they have to meditate for hours and hours a day to be on top of their game. And most executives don't have that kind of
Right.
time.
Right.
And so it has to be like a daily practice of being curious about yourself, being curious about others, being curious about the situation. I think curiosity is really the key to being a good leader, not only about the people, not only about the work, but about yourself. And by being curious about what's going on in your brain and the roommate and your two attorneys sitting on your shoulders, that's the path forward, as simply as I can put it.
Yeah, I agree. I think there has to be reflection. You
Mhm.
have to reflect on the things that you're doing. Take time for yourself. Cup of coffee, glass of wine, whatever works for whatever puts fizz in your soda. I'm good with that. Take some time and think about it and say, say I do my best thinking behind the steering wheel because
Mhm.
it gives me an opportunity to really reflect on some things while I'm obviously paying attention to what I'm doing, hopefully. And but you need that time for reflection. But we live in a society that demands action, that we have to get out there and do something and make it happen, if you will. So I think there you have to strike a balance. Let me ask you this question. I think we've covered the major topics that I wanted to cover. So I'm
Mhm.
just going to open the door for you here and ask you this question. The next several minutes are yours. What's your message? What did tell our listeners, tell our viewers who see this on YouTube and Rumble, just say Martin has a message for you. Here it is.
I think the message that I have is that everybody needs a coach. Everybody needs help. I tried to do it by myself for a long time. I didn't really understand the idea of coaching, and I hired coaches for myself in, was it 2013? And I was at a very low point in my career, a very low point in my life. I was really struggling because I was trying to do it all by myself. And I hired these two unbelievably intelligent ladies, and they changed my life within months. I went from being this very unhappy, miserable, stressed out human being to being content, happy. Now, still have my issues, still
Yeah,
had things going on,
yeah.
but I was viewing it in a very different way. And now that I'm a coach, I see that every person that I get in front of, I help, even if I just have one session with them. I know that from the beginning of the session to the end of the session, I've made an impact on them. And I think that's the message, is go out and find help. And it's not necessarily within an organization. That's mentorship, which is one thing. A coach that's outside an organization it's confidential. So that the conversations that you're having is not going to go outside of that relationship, which is different than like an in company mentorship. And we're trained. I've got over 1,000 hours of training to be a coach. And so we're trained to actually jump in and help and have answers for people who have real issues going on. I find that a lot of the real successful people like myself were actually driven by something negative. I was driven by the fear of failure by most of my life. And yeah, that drove me to do some great things, but man, it took a real toll on me mentally and physically. And then when I realized that I could still have that same drive and same passion without the fear of failure, it completely opened my life and changed my path forever. And so that's what I'm hoping to really bring to other folks.
And I think you made an interesting point, a very interesting point, and that is the coach is someone on the outside of the
Mhm.
organization
Right.
rather than a mentor who's someone may feel internally bound
Mhm.
to the organizational philosophy, and it maybe adjust their position in regard to that. But a coach on the outside, someone coming in from the outside, doesn't have an axe to grind, so to speak. I think that's important. Is that how you see it?
Absolutely. I see mentorship is good. I think it's good to
Oh
have
yeah,
people in organizations that are trying to help other people, but they usually have an agenda. They see a person, they want that person to be promoted, or they're mentoring them for something specific. As a coach, I have no agenda. Like you said, I have no axe to grind. I'm going in there to find out really what I can about that person and what it is they're really struggling with, not what they say they're struggling with, but what they're really struggling with, and then help them with that. And usually, once we can break into that, man, all the pieces start to come together.
I agree. Listen, Martin, you've been a fabulous guest. I appreciate your time and the effort here today. We're going to wrap it up right now, and I want to thank everybody, all the listeners and all the viewers, for tuning into the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. This is Dr. John Dentico. You have an absolutely wonderful day.
Thank you, sir. You're doing great work.